Welcome back, friends. James Corbett here, CorbettReport.com, with this week's edition of Propaganda Watch. And this week on the Deep program, I want to pick up on a thought that I broached yesterday in Questions for Corbett about how Japan is reacting to this crisis, namely the observation that this crisis that we are being steeped in right now is fundamentally a question of perception management. Now, to some extent, perception management is a term that itself could be a synonym for propaganda. That is what all propaganda aims at, is to manage the perception of a topic in the minds of the public. But I really want to double underline, bold, 80-point font, put several exclamation marks around this term, perception management, because that is the base of the propaganda that we're seeing spewing out right now regarding the ongoing crisis. And in order to demonstrate that, I just want to put you back in your mindset of just a few weeks ago, when you had heard precisely 0% of the population ever having heard of, let alone actively using, the epidemiological terminology that we've all been exposed to lately, like flattening the curve and social distancing. Go back to that mindset where literally no one you've ever has heard of or thought about this issue or used those terms. And then fast forward just a week or two after that point to a scene like this playing out in Brooklyn. Now, at first glance, you might be tempted to say, okay, well, so what? People have been hearing about flattening the curve and social distancing because this is part of this pandemic crisis that we're dealing with, and they're trying to encourage other people to go home. But no, wait, don't just dismiss that. Think about what just happened. You, wherever you are, have just watched a video about some guy in Brooklyn screaming about flatten the curve, go home. How did that video come to you? How did you get that video? I don't mean how does the internet work, but I mean it in this sense. I'm a guy here sitting in Japan, where, as I showed you yesterday, there is not this sense of crisis, although it looks like the Olympics will be postponed. But here I am sitting where thousands of miles away, and yet I have seen this video and brought it to you. Why? How did that happen? Well, I'll tell you specifically how that happened. I was reading a Reuters report about what was happening in the US. This must have been over a week ago at this point, probably 10 days ago. I was reading some Reuters report about the way America is responding to the crisis. And in that Reuters report, it had a paragraph about, and a man in Brooklyn was heard screaming, flattening the curve out of his window and telling people to go home. And the thought immediately stuck out to me, because perhaps I process this information differently than other people, but I thought, how many times in your life would you think, the respectable news agency Reuters, reporting international news of pressing concern, is writing about what some guy in Brooklyn was screaming out of his window? Why? What? How is that news? How is that story news that needs to be reported to the public? The answer is quite obvious. It's because the media is trying to model the behavior that goes around and shapes your perception of these terms. It's not just there. In fact, it's an assault from every level and every side right now. It's coordinated and it is happening. And you have to consciously realize it's happening. Don't just passively accept it as, of course, this is what's happening. You watch the press conferences, if not the White House ones, maybe the Bill de Blasio or Governor Cuomo, sitting there sternly lecturing the public health official, wherever you are, in whatever part of the globe you're inhabiting, the public health official sternly telling you, we have to practice social distancing, flattening the curve. We have to flatten the curve. You see, here's the curve as it would apply if everyone got sick all at once. And here's how we flatten the curve if we have social distancing. And these terms hammered into you over and over and over from these stern-looking officials lecturing the public about what to do. And these officials, if you actually watch these press conferences, They really are talking to you like children. And I say that with professional experience because, as you may or may not know, I used to be an English teacher, literally teaching elementary and junior high school children. And I can tell you that is how most teachers talk to their children. Talking down to them, making sure that they understand, okay, this is flatten the curve, and this is what it is, and this is what it looks like, and this is how you use it. Flatten the curve, and just repeat it over and over to drill it into the children's heads. This is exactly how the health authorities are lecturing the public right now. Then, okay, let's say that spontaneously manifests in some guy yelling out his window, go home, flatten the curve, which gets recorded, put up on Twitter, then reported as a news event in media all around the world, including in Reuters. I couldn't find that Reuters story again after having read it over a week ago, but I did find this on NBC New York. New Yorkers do their part to help flatten the curve by yelling out their windows. Again, they have made a literal news story out of this single isolated event of someone yelling out their window. If I go out and yell out my window, 9/11 was an inside job, do you think that is going to be reported internationally as a major news story? Of course not. At the very best, it's, some crazy guy was calling us and everyone called the cops, yay, something like that. But of course not. It is because the media is trying to model, specifically showing you how you are supposed to use this terminology, what it is for, and ultimately what this is for revolves around another term that is being quietly embedded in the public consciousness: quarantine shaming. U.S. navigates radical new social norms, by Jillian Flackus for the Associated Press, March 19th, 2020. The chairman of Arizona's Asian Chamber of Commerce didn't see much downside to attending a small dinner at a local restaurant to bolster the business and bring together other leaders to discuss how to help Asian American eateries devastated by the coronavirus. That was, at least, until he posted about it on Instagram. The feedback was swift from people who were appalled that Ryan Winkle would promote a gathering, even a small one, as COVID-19 raged and entire cities were urged to self-isolate. I started getting some messages saying, hey, why are you trying to spread the virus? I was like, it's a small event, and everyone had washed their hands, and they had sanitizer on the tables, Winkle said of the dinner held Saturday in Mesa, Arizona. My thinking is always about the economics. Imagine when all these businesses shut down. That's a whole different problem. Quarantine shaming, calling out those not abiding by social distancing rules, is part of a new and startling reality for Americans who must navigate a world of rapidly evolving social norms in the age of COVID-19. As schools close and shelter-in-place orders sweep across the U.S., the divide between those who are stringently practicing self-isolation and those who are still trying to go about some semblance of a normal life has never been more clear. Complicating matters, what was socially acceptable even 48 hours ago may now be taboo, as government officials race to contain the virus with ever-expanding circles of social isolation. The time matrix seems to be shifting. I've never known several days to go by so slowly, and watching the collective conscience move more and more in one direction day by day, said Paula Flasker, who lost her bartending job when California's Mammoth Mountain ski resort closed this weekend. As you may have noticed, there are not just words and phrases. This isn't just air coming out of people's mouth holes. These are entire cultural perceptions that bring with them social norms that you have to abide by, or you will be shamed. And of course, shaming, oh, okay, well, whatever, sticks and stones. No, this is going to have real consequences on your life going forward. This is just the indoctrination phase of this type of rhetoric. At first, they just start lecturing you about, oh, you have to abide by proper social distancing. Good citizens will abide by these rules that we're putting into place right now. And, it's all voluntary. You can do whatever you want, but you should stay home and you should flatten the curve and you should do social distancing. And they're explaining to you exactly what this means and how to do it properly. And then the media is taking that and modeling it for you by making international news stories out of people yelling out their windows, or people trying to shame a member of the Chamber of Commerce for having a meal, or showing you again what this means and what the social consequences are going to be if you don't follow these, because they're steeping you in gradually and leading you along, again, exactly as you would teach children about a new concept. And where is this ultimately leading? Of course, it's always been about the Governor Cuomo saying, look, we're not joking around. It's voluntary right now, but if you guys don't act properly, we're going to have to come in. It's getting the public on board with the idea, getting everyone shaming each other so that there's this social enforcement that's coming from the lower levels, so that when they bring in the police and or the National Guard and or the army and whatever else, then we had to do it. We gave people freedom and they abused it. They didn't do what we said in the way we told them to. This is part of an indoctrination process that's going on right now, which might have sounded crazy, say, 12 hours ago. Until you get stories like this one from Canada, where, of course, the exact same social